Today is February 8th, 2024. We are in person as well as virtually today at Washington State Liquor Cannabis Board at 9 a.m. To better manage our meeting, if you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and the organization you are with. Written comments on today's agenda items should have been received by email or website by close of business yesterday, February 7th. And we did receive one comment that we will get to later on in the agenda. The chat feature has been turned off. If you have technical difficulties, please email us at askus@wsgc.law.gov. Executive session will begin around 11:30 today, and we anticipate it lasting about 1 hour. I will go ahead and call the roll of the commission and ex officio members to ensure a quorum. So Vice Chair Patterson is excused today. Commissioner Sizemore.
Here.
Commissioner Lawson. Here. Commissioner Ibsen.
Present.
Ex officios, Senator Conway. Okay. Senator Holy. Representative Klova. And Representative Robertson. Okay. So we do have a quorum. So with that, we will get started with the consent agenda, January 11th and 12th meeting minutes, January 22nd meeting minutes, new licenses, the HBCR list, and the 2024 meeting locations. You will note many of those are at this same building, but there are a couple that will be at the Gambling Commission headquarters.
Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented by staff, which includes holding the April 2024 meeting at the Gambling Commission office in Lacey.
Okay, 1 second before that, I'm going to ask for public comments. Is there any public comments on this or any comments from the commissioner? Hearing none. Okay, we have
I'll second the amendment or second the
motion. Okay, it's been we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Right, motion passes. Next up, we have the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation request to exceed the 300,000 limit and raffle prizes with Jim Melville, Special Agent, and Alex Beyer, Regional Director of Western Washington. We both here. Good morning.
Good morning.
May begin when you're ready.
Good morning, commissioners and ex officios. My name is Jim Melville. I'm a special agent in the Regulations and Enforcement Unit in the Spokane office. I'm here today to introduce the Rocky Mountain Elks Foundation, which is seeking the commissioner's approval to exceed the $300,000 annual prize. The Rocky Mountain Elks Foundation has held a raffle license with us since 1996. With that, I would like to introduce Alex Beyer, who is the Regional Director of Western Washington for the Rocky Mountain Elks Foundation, who will be presenting today.
Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for putting this on your agenda today. My name's Alex Beyer. I'm the Regional Director of Western Washington for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. We are a registered 501c3 nonprofit based out of Missoula, Montana, whose mission is to ensure the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. I'm before you today to request a waiver to exceed the $300,000 limit in raffle prizes paid in the calendar year of 2024 established by WAC 230-11-067 subsection 3. First, I want to thank you for engaging in rulemaking on the suite of requests submitted by us and many other nonprofits in Washington. These changes will greatly aid in our ability to maximize our fundraising efforts, and in turn, mission delivery while still keeping the gambling activities we host safe, honest, and legal. 2023 was a banner year for our efforts in Washington and around the country. Here at home, we successfully raised $1.6 million net dollars, a second consecutive state record. In return of the efforts made by our incredible volunteers who help us raise these funds and deserve the recognition, we had a record state allocation in 2023. Our funds were used to leverage additional matching funds from our valued partners, resulting in a total effort of nearly $1.7 million in 2023. In total, we supported 14 habitat enhancement projects, including prescribed burns and pre-commercial thins to promote forest health and biodiverse landscapes, a watershed restoration to promote healthy fish habitat, along with several noxious weed treatments and other post-fire restoration efforts. Additionally, we were able to partner with the Swinomish tribe, conducting a collaring effort to monitor the movement and habitat selection of the North Cascades elk herd in hopes of using the information to help reduce human-wildlife conflict in the area. In support of our hunting heritage, we partnered with some truly incredible locally operating organizations like Youth Outdoor Unlimited, First Hunt Foundation, Washington Outdoor Women, and Outdoors for Our Heroes, who work to involve new, diverse, and underserved people in our community. By providing unique outdoor experiences, these organizations ensure the perpetuation of our shared hunting heritage. Outside of Washington, we completed 2 landscape-level habitat conservation projects. Phase 2 of the Minam project secured 15,000 acres and 112 miles of the second most ecologically important river in Northeast Oregon. It was turned over to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife for public use and ownership in perpetuity. In Appalachia, we partnered with private landowners, the state agency, and other NGOs to secure permanent public access to 55,000 acres of private land under a groundbreaking voluntary conservation agreement. Looking into the long-term future of wildlife needs and conflict mitigation, we were honored to partner with the Property and Environment Research Center by contributing to their brucellosis outbreak fund. By easing the burden of a potential outbreak, we are able to ease concerns of livestock producers and increase our social carrying capacity. In the age of constant human development, the private lands of our producers provide incredibly vital wildlife habitat. It is because of the incredibly generous support that we receive from communities all over Washington at our big game banquets and other in-person fundraising events that I'm before you today. We request that the $300,000 limit established for the total value of prizes awarded through charitable gambling activities in a calendar year be waived and amended to a limit of $550,000 for 2024. At the close of 2023, we were approximately $20,000 shy of our approved limit of $500,000. Due to economic conditions and the fact that we are still experiencing increasing fair market values, we expect to increase our reliance on raffles to effectively fundraise. It is for these reasons we are requesting an additional $50,000 increase from our 2023 waiver. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sizemore, yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about the forest resiliency work that you're doing? I don't recall in past years that being a function that Rocky Mountain Elk had taken on. Can you kind of talk about that just a little bit more and how long that's been a part of the work of the foundation?
Yeah, habitat enhancement projects have been part of our work since the very beginning. It's not something that we advertise nearly as much as the large scale land acquisitions, but we partner with WDFW, other state agencies, and the U.S. Forest Service to help provide funds for critically underfunded projects. Especially in this day and age, the pre-commercial thins are extremely important to help reduce ladder fuels and increase forest resilience when it comes to wildfires. So we primarily get involved in the pre-commercial thins just because there's not a lot of economic incentives for logging companies to partake in those. So by providing funds for them, we're able to help reduce those fuel loads and then open up the forest canopy, which helps generate some additional forage for the critters that run around.
Ask a follow-up.
Yes.
Does Washington receive a similar amount of effort on that, or compared to maybe Idaho or Montana, Wyoming, or are the efforts pretty similar in the states that you're present in?
So how our organizational structure works is 50% of the net dollars that we raise in that state are brought back to that state. the following year. So the record funds that we raised in 2023 will be in our coffers for 2024. So we'll be looking at a state allocation of approximately between $600,000 and $700,000. We don't have the final numbers yet, and that's money that will be spent in Washington on Washington projects. Additionally, Washington is an elk state, so because it's an elk state, we often receive additional funds back from the national coffers for those large-scale land acquisitions, as well as our national post-fire restoration program, which Washington has been a recipient of every year since its inception in 2019.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from any other commissioners? Right, any public comments? Yes,
I'll do the motion.
all right.
Ready?
I believe we're ready, yes.
I move to approve Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation's request to exceed $300,000 limit and grant a $550,000 limit in raffle prizes paid during the license year ending December 31st, 2024.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very much appreciate your time.
All right, next up, we have a budget update with Crescinda Hansen. Good morning.
Good morning. While we're waiting for my presentation to come up on the screen, for the record, my name is Crescinda Hansen and I am the CFO of the County Commission. And when at the January meeting, I provided a budget update about our revenues based on numbers from the first quarter of the fiscal year, so the third quarter of the calendar year, and where we were. And at that time, I committed to coming back today and giving you further update because the second quarter of the fiscal year filings were due January 31st. So I'm able to give some more updated numbers. Thank you. It says it's on. Is it? Hopefully people can hear me if they're virtual. So next slide, please. Thank you. So just a reminder again of what we did last year. Thank you for the confirmation about Mike. I saw a little thumbs up. Last year, when we brought before you the fact that we needed to do some work with the fees because of revenue concerns, we went through the same process that we're going through now, where we brought the issue before you. You chose to initiate rulemaking. We held some tribal consultation meetings, some stakeholder meetings. We had some proposed numbers based on feedback that we heard. We did some more work. The initial numbers that we proposed were estimated to carry us through the end of the biennium to generate enough revenue so that we would be able to operate through the end of biennium without concerns. After some feedback and some additional consideration, the changes that we made last year were estimated to carry us through the end of this fiscal year, with a couple acknowledgements. One, that we would probably be back before you to have the same conversation a year later. And then also that the changes that we made to the fees would not be significant enough to completely cover the revenue that we needed. And we committed to using some of our available fund balance to close any remaining gap between our revenue and expenditures. We estimated we would need to use up to $2.6 million over the fiscal year to close that. So the fees that ended up being changed were a 10% increase to the base fee, a 6% increase to the quarterly rate, and a 60% increase to the maximum annual license fee. And that was effective shortly before 30 June. So next slide, please. So just a reminder, again, of what we did last year. Thank you for the confirmation about Mike. I saw a little thumbs up. So So just a reminder about how that rollout happened and some assumptions that we made when we made those changes. We assumed, based on historical information, that we would see a 3% increase in gross gambling receipts reported by the organizations that report quarterly and potentially pay quarterly, depending on their business volume. And between the 3% increase in the gross gambling receipts and the changes to the fees, we assumed that would result in an additional $2 million in revenue. And then when the changes were effective, they rolled out, not all at once, but they became effective as our entities renewed their licenses. So the table that you see here is just how many licensees that that the new rates were effective for each quarter. So next slide, please. So what we've seen is that gambling activity is cyclic, and that is what we're seeing here. The first 2 quarters on this slide are when COVID restrictions were still in place and then being lifted. So those receipts reported are significantly lower than what we see starting in, excuse me, the next quarter there, that's 2020. I cannot read from here. I apologize. The third bar on the graph. So what we see is that it is cyclic, with the first quarter of the calendar year being the highest. And it's a little challenging to tell here, but on the next slide, if you could, please. We can see that if we compare the quarters in 2022 to the quarters in 2023, we did not see a 3% growth. As a matter of fact, for quarter 3 of 2023, it was just over a 4% decline in gross gambling receipts reported. In quarter 4, it was about a 1% decrease. So that has impacted our revenue projections. So next slide, please. So where this puts us now, as of January 31st, is that by looking at our revenue projections that we had used at the beginning of the fiscal year, we estimated that we would have 11.7 million in revenue for this fiscal year. What we're actually seeing is about 9.9 million, so a gap of 1.8. And that variance is for 2 reasons. One is that 3% gross gambling rate increase that we did not see, that has not been realized. And then also when I did these projections and we proposed these fee increases, I was still relatively new to the Gambling Commission, and I had not learned all the ins and outs and how we could implement things. So I had assumed at that point in time that all the changes would be effective July 1. I've since learned that those rate changes are effective as licenses renew. So we didn't have 100% of that new revenue all beginning in July. So those 2 factors are contributing to our $1.8 million gap that we're seeing now. Next slide, please. So what this means for us is that we are back because we're not going to have enough revenue in an ongoing fashion, even though we did adjust those fees. And what I will share with you is a projection of our fund balance for the next 18 months. So looking at that fund balance, I just want to make sure that I share the assumptions with everyone. I looked at our first 6 months of this fiscal year to estimate what our revenue would be. Because we didn't see the increase in gross gambling receipts, I've used our actual revenue and left our revenue projection flat. So no increase in our revenue based on the numbers that we have right now. Also, for our expenditures, I used the assumption that we would be spending what was approved in future months. So through 2024 fiscal year that ends June 30, the budget that was approved by commissioners last July, the monthly amount is what is used to estimate our expenditures moving forward. For fiscal year 25, I've used the budget that was approved last July, and increased it by $800,000 because the governor's supplemental budget that was released showed that we would have an additional $800,000 expenditure, total expenditures over the next fiscal year in central service costs, which are non-discretionary spending. And then because we do know that costs are still increasing, the remainder of our 2025 budget that is not related to personnel, I increased that by 2%, just as an estimate of those increased costs. And then the last expenditure that was added for purposes of this projection is $500,000 for a software license renewal. We know that we're in the midst of our IT modernization project. We know that we will be buying software from a vendor to replace our current legacy systems. And with purchasing that software comes the obligation to pay annual license fees, which we have not had to do in the past. And we know from our RFI that those fees are going to be anywhere between $250,000 to $450,000, and then add tax and probably cost increases by the time we get a year out. $500,000 is the estimate that we used. So again, just the challenges about this is that, you know, I wasn't aware of the rolling implementation when we did this last year, and trying to project our revenue has been extremely challenging because of that rolling implementation, but also because we're looking at multiple types of licenses that renew it multiple times throughout the year. And there's 3 variables to the fee. So it's extremely complex. And then layer on top of that, that we're trying to estimate what the gross gambling receipts that will be reported are. So those, just lots of variables going into this. So with that, next slide, please. So this slide is our projected available fund balance. So our fund balance at the end of December was the 4.37 million. And just to be clear, when I say available fund balance, if you go back and look at the slides that I presented last month, our overall fund balance then was about 19 million, but we have money set aside for our IT modernization project, for our records management system project, for access control project that we know we have to do. And we also have to keep in reserve a working capital balance. We hold 3 months because our revenue is cyclic by quarter. Our working capital balance that we hold in reserve is a quarter's worth of expenditures. So if we subtract out all those things that we know we already need money for, the money that is available after that at the end of December was the 4.37 million. So this is just showing our fund balance over time if we do nothing to change our fees, and both the revenue projection and our expenditure projections come true to what I've used with all the variables that I've mentioned. So what this is showing is that by March, the end of March of 2025, we would have about $340,000 in available fund balance. Anything after that, we would be into our working capital balance. So which the trend's not sustainable, obviously looking at the line. So, but I just wanted to explain where we are and where we're headed and what the timeline looks like, because rulemaking takes a lot of time. So next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. My paper hit the mic. In January, you voted to initiate rulemaking to address fees for organizations, not including sports wagering. If we choose to extend that, this is the potential change options that would still make adjustments before we are in the negative, or later timeline, we would be in the negative before we started realizing revenue. So it would be harder to come back out of that dip. But these are the alternate timelines if we don't, if you don't choose to have us come to you next month with proposed fees. So the soonest that we could have proposed fees for 102 would be next month. And then if we followed that timeline, the effective date of a new rule would be prior to June 30. So if we did not do that, these are the next two sets of timelines to align with quarterly filings and how it would affect our revenue. So, and that concludes my presentation. Any question?
Any of the commissioners have any questions?
Yes.
A couple. So if you go back to the quarters the bars of the various quarters, so probably like slide 4 or 5.
Slide 5, if you can bring it back up.
That one will work.
Yeah. Okay.
So you pointed out Q3 of 2023 versus Q3 of 2022. Now, I mean, the gross gambling receipts were, 3.7 million different, but that's not 4%. That's of 250 million or 240 million. That's 1.3% maybe.
So I would have to go back and look at my exact numbers because.
Right, so go back one more slide.
Yeah. So
it shows 247, 137, so we'll just say 247.
Okay.
And then Q3 of 2023 shows 243.5. So it's 3.5 million difference in gross gambling receipts. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
No, but as a percentage of 250 million, it's only about 1 point.
Oh, yeah. So correct. I apologize. So
Nope.
so what the difference is, the 4.7 is the gap, right? Because we expected 3, but not only did we not get 3, it shrunk. Yeah. So yes, I apologize.
Okay, so I just want
Yeah.
to make sure I wasn't reading that incorrectly.
No.
So if I can follow up. So I think it's completely understandable to have, lay this out and look at it as a potential 3% growth within gross gambling receipts. I mean, I don't know how much we can kind of, forecast going forward, but it looks like when I come to the assumptions page, that you've essentially said, okay, whatever happened the last 2 quarters of last year is kind of what we should anticipate going forward. So pretty conservative. And then adding the governor's budget estimate, and plus actually adding another 2% to non-personnel costs. So, I mean, there's really, if any one of these performs better than what these new assumptions are, then we essentially have more time before we reach into our capital balance. Is that
Possibly, yes. So if revenue is better, expenditures are less, or both of those things are true, yes, we would have additional time before we approach 0. Yes.
Yes.
All right. And this and I'm not sure if, hopefully maybe folks from the industry might be able to help us out a little bit on this. So maybe it's open for a later discussion, but the Q3 2022, I try to go back into my Wayback Machine. Seems like that's kind of when everything opened back up.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether the industry felt like, that was like best quarter ever. Like people had been waiting, and then so they kind of went out and splurged, and then settled back down into kind of expected behavior. So, ultimately, I guess maybe this isn't a question so much as a statement. It feels to me, especially if you were to look at the next bar, we really only have, you know, a year and a half kind of data, usable data here, and maybe that that 2022 third quarter might have even been an anomaly. But if I look at it, I mean, we're really somewhere in the, you know, 245 million is kind of what I'm seeing across here. There's a 251 million quarter, which hopefully if the first quarter of 2024 acts like that quarter, we're going to have, you know, pretty good revenue, not probably the 3% growth, you know, obviously that you were looking at. But it feels to me like we really don't have enough data to make drastic moves. I think it's really important that we have this information. I think it would be a big mistake on our part to do anything related to expenditures. I mean, I think we need to make sure that our staff realize that we are 100% supportive of the mission that they're doing, and that we will provide the resources they need to do that mission. So, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I would. We need more staff. Yes, if that's the summary.
All right.
Yes.
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 Yeah, maybe if there's any public comment that kind of tells us kind of what the industry's thinking and looking at, that'd be great.
I think Director Griffin wanted to say something.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to just kind of give a update as to some of the feedback that we received and our meetings with tribal partners this Tuesday, as well as stakeholders, as we had another meeting with stakeholders and licensees on Tuesday as well. And so what we were looking for, obviously, is we rolled out this information because this was one of the questions we had as we presented our potential issue to you all in January. And given that it takes, from history, you know, from last year, it takes 6 months to do rulemaking, and then another 12 months until we have everyone rolled into still not receiving a full year's worth of any fee increase. But so we need to do some pre-planning, and we're trying to be proactive here, but there were a lot of questions still outstanding. So at those meetings that we had on Tuesday, while we were informing and passing along the information that we had just received, like days earlier, yes, we did spend some time answering questions, but as I passed along to both groups, we were really there to listen to their ideas and suggestions for short-term and long-term sustainable funding for the agency. And so just to share just a little bit of that feedback, because you'll you know, even though we're in a rulemaking process, you know, this feedback will be summarized and shared for you when you do take action, or the rule actually comes before you, but just so that you're having timely information and you can, you know, think about this as well. Good information that was shared. And so one thing that was shared was exactly to your point, Commissioner Sizemore, is that gambling is cyclical in the state. It has historically been cyclical, and according to operators continues to be cyclical. And that third quarter, second quarter of the first quarter of the year. So we're coming upon receiving that information, has historically been the highest quarter of the year, which was displayed here. Unfortunately, we moved into, so we tried to go back and get that data, and we don't really have that data in good format to go back and look at, because we switched to our new fee structure in middle of 2018, and not all licensees were rolled into the new fee structure and reporting until July or June of 2019. And then we went into pandemic, you know, the middle of towards the end of the first quarter of 2020. So we'll continue to try to find that data to see if we can't provide any more historical information to go back and look at. The conversation focused on, yes, if weight, things might show a change in terms of expected revenue. And so let's give this a little bit more time before we continue to make some decisions. Was information that was shared. Also, look at cost-cutting measures, take into consideration vacancy rates are usually at about 10%. And then lastly, fee increases were very erroneous to licensee. Like there was a big burden. This last fee increase was a big burden for licensees. And so again, ask to kind of give them more time, give us all more time before decisions are made and action is taken. So with that, I would echo that while we have run a vacancy rate, I know that it's important for you all that we try to fill positions, which we are trying to fill position, like we have 3 people scheduled to start within the next less than 30 days. And so we're thrilled about that. And so we would definitely ask that you allow us to continue to move forward to try to fill positions and not do a hold for vacancy rates. So that's the information, just in brief summary that was provided, and I thought it might be beneficial for you all to take that into consideration.
Thank you. And Commissioner Impson, you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. Thank you for your presentation, Crescenda. So clarifying question, first off, on slide 9 with the fund balance, does this assume full funding and full hiring of all the positions, or does it account for vacancy savings?
No, so this, well, setting the revenue part of the conversation aside, if you're asking about the expenditures, it assumes for projection purposes that we would be fully staffed and fully expended every.
Okay. Yes. And more of a question of methodology with all your fiscal projections, not including just the fee side. This reminds me a lot of like OFM with the state budget process, and usually that's preceded with an economic analysis. And to Tina's point about gambling being cyclical, this is more just me being new and just curious about how the forecasting process works. But historically, do we tend to find that there are any patterns with anticipated gambling revenues, like with inflation versus recession, or are there any trends that we tend to see more often than not as repeating patterns throughout history?
So unfortunately, I can't speak to that, both because I've only been here 2 years. We are working on trying to get access to former filing data in a way that we can apply it to this quarterly reporting. And also, I think, you know, the data we do have has COVID thrown in the middle of it, which just really messes with everything. So I am going, if we are able to have more data to provide, we will definitely provide that. And that could probably play into some answers. So
And with the software upgrade, that'll also make budgeting analytics a lot easier moving forward, and also
that is
historical
my hope.
analysis.
Yes,
Okay.
that is my hope.
Knock on wood. Thank you, Crescenda.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Crescenda. Do that update. Next, we will go to the legislative.
Excuse me, Chair, I did have one thing to help for March. I'm sorry. Could you, if you wouldn't mind, so that we are best prepared to bring the information that before you in March, because that would be the earliest that we could file any language. But if you could kind of give us a direction of information that you'd like to see in March, do you want us to have a rule prepared? Are you thinking more time? Just kind of want to make sure that we're meeting the mark with what you think is best moving forward.
No one else wants to jump in. Yeah, I think that bringing forth a rule rule language next month or in April before we have more real hard data, I think sends the wrong message, kind of I think it creates potentially some angst that that could be unsettling to the industry. So, not that I want anybody to have to scramble within the agency to try to get something to us suddenly. I think if we just keep looking at the data, keep having, some conversations, I think that, because a proposal now would be like, here's the flat rate that we think we need to do, flat changes that we need to do. And I think that we're not prepared for that yet. So I guess, and I don't know how long it would take. I mean, I would love to know what the gross gambling receipts for each of the license classes are. Just so I can get it's just a little bit of more information that would say, house party, bank card rooms, here's what the gross gambling receipts are within this silo and pull tabs and, bingo and other nonprofits. So, I think that may, start us down a path of being able to dissect the various activities a little bit more. So, so that's something I would like to see in the next month or two, hopefully, to be able to further analyze, the big picture and try to make sure we're thoughtful going forward.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up what I was thinking. I just hadn't put it all together yet to get anything out. So good job, Bruce, besides.
Certainly wasn't looking for a motion or anything, just some discussion, and that's helpful. If
you guys have any other information you'd be looking for, or?
If I may, I just want to, just for clarity, the next significant revenue update that I would be able to provide would be at the May meeting because of the timing of the quarterly filings, and they're not due until the end of the month after the close of the quarter. So they'd be due the April 30th with a short turnaround, but with a similar kind of presentation at the May meeting. I'd be able to, that would be the next significant revenue update.
Okay, and is there on the chart you provided, if we were to do something in May, do we know when that would put us?
I believe that would put us to either September or December for rulemaking.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
It would if we, I'm sorry, so slide 10, if we did that, if we wanted to have something effective by September 30, it would require a special meeting in June.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
And we'd have time for stakeholder work in the end of May, and like essentially that 4 weeks in between May and whatever it's meeting.
Yeah, we would follow exactly what we did this month. We would quickly try to turn the numbers around, May 1st, May 2nd, and then follow basically the same schedule, try to meet on Monday or Tuesday with tribal partners, stakeholders, and then we'd have this meeting with, this topic. And then even if we were to move forward with the rule in March, we've set meeting dates aside for tribal partner and stakeholdering. So all of that we'll just push it now to the future. But we will definitely be bringing you monthly updates, at least on available fund balance, if not other conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we will go to the legislative update with Director Griffin.
Looking around for staff, and I guess that would be me. So yes, we are at a point where none of the gambling bills that have been introduced this session have moved forward. We do have a few bills that we are supporting. House Bill 1961 concerning animal cruelty. That has passed. We sent our letter of support to the committee. They had already had a hearing on that. So I did not testify, but it has passed out of the House and it has been referred to Senate Law and Justice. And so watching as of yesterday, there was no hearing date, but you know, those are usually scheduled today. So so we'll be watching for that and then forwarding off. I think we've already forwarded off to committee chair to make sure that they are aware. And then of course I'll be testifying if and when that bill gets a hearing. House Bill 2055 also sent letters of support to the committee, and I testified in support of the bill on behalf of the commission. That bill did pass out of committee, was referred to rules, but excuse me, referred to appropriations, sorry, and it did not make it out of appropriation. There was no hearing. And this is the bill for creating a gambling treatment diversion court pilot program. So I would believe that that is most likely dead at this point. Senator get promoted, Commissioner Ibsen. Commissioner Ibsen had his confirmation hearing, and that appointment was passed out of committee on January 30th, and still working with committee staff to potentially, though committee hearing dates are very tight this short session, working to have, see if we can have a confirmation hearing for you, Chair, and that is all I have for you.
Great. Thank you for the update.
One question.
One question.
One question. So, and I just haven't had a chance to look through it. Knowing all the work that the agency did for our limited authority folks last year, I noticed that there was Senate Bill 6181 relating to law enforcement officer definition. Are we 100% certain that all the work we did last year isn't going to get undone by this?
Thank you for pointing that out. And so we knew that they were trying to, in speaking with Director Alexander and the commission meetings that we had participated in the previous years, we knew that it was the CJTC's commissioners. They wanted to have reserve officers wrapped into that, into the certification requirement as well. So this doesn't surprise me that they're moving forward and trying to have reserve officers defined in some capacity. So it does not change what we have put forward, because we are still, it's not changing the definition in 1093-020, which is the most important definition. And then for CJTC purposes, it's not impacting how we are defined as law enforcement personnel under 43101. So I think we're fine.
Just, I guess I would advise just, keep track of it. I mean,
We'll be watching, yes.
Interpretations by a different agency messed us up last time, so.
Right. So so we are specifically listed in RCW 1093-020 as a limited law enforcement agency, and then also specifically listed under the definition of limited law enforcement peace officer. So then when you go into CJTC statute 43010, what our bill did was to insert us into their definition of law enforcement personnel, and as well as peace officer, and how they're using those terms in 43101. And so they're not changing those two definitions at all. And we're not specifically listed, but it references back to 1093-020. So as long as nothing ever happens to 1093. But yes, we'll be watching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, next we have the IT Modernization update with Deputy Director Drumheller.
Morning, Chair, Commissioners. Gary Drumheller, Deputy Director. This morning, I'm going to cover the two IT modernization projects that we have ongoing. And you should have a handout in front of you also be up on the screen. First, start off with how we kind of got here. We have legacy systems in place right now that are probably 30 years old. And they basically say we use duct tape to keep it going every day. It is an understatement. We have 2 full-time FTE people that are working on this every single day to keep it up and running. And they're ready to retire on top of that. And so we need to get this fixed and get something new, get us into the 21st century so we can have current IT products that meet the standard today. And so that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of how we got here. And I'll let you know where we're headed. And so you can see our timeline. We started back in March of 23, and I'll cover most of those little bullets up there. As you can see, we're getting close, but we're still far away. Even though that's April, there's more to do after that. That's just kind of all the prep work to get us there. So to start off this project, we had staff come in, look at processes. We started with about 600 processes in place. We narrowed that down to 125. Through more looking at different processes, we got it down to 78, and we ended up with 90, which I'd say from 600 to 90 is pretty good. And I think that will help us get to where we need to be. And you can see kind of the breakdown in this slide of all the different places these processes are. As you can see, application is the most because that's where everything starts. And it goes many different directions when somebody applies for a license. And so they had 31 of the 90. So they have a third of all of our processes. Just to give you a brief, I know you can't read that, but that's kind of, I just wanted to give you an example of what that looked like. And when you look at this slide, there's many different avenues when it first started. And so we were able to narrow down processes, combine processes to try to make it the most efficient that we could. And so this is kind of the final result. So I just wanted to give you a couple examples of what that looked like. And there's some other ones that are a lot more complex, like the investigation slide, when there's an investigation and how it goes. But I couldn't even get it on the screen. So I figured that wasn't a good example. But that just kind of gives you an example of what those processes ended up being. And I can send you a PDF that you can enlarge it if you want to look at the little boxes later on. So with our staff, we started out with subject matter experts working with our contractors. And through that process, we had a lag in getting our processes approved. And so we had to stop, regroup, and look at what's a better way of doing it. So we added our leadership group into this process. So as our subject matter experts were going through the processes, it could be approved by our leadership group almost simultaneously. So we didn't have this lag between staff getting the process done and then leadership looking at it later and trying to approve it. It could all happen simultaneously. So that seemed to work a lot better. We dedicated 2 full days to this project, and that included about 20 to 30 staff in each meeting. So very time consuming, but I think at the end of the day, very well worth our time and effort. And this is just an example. We're down to half a day now. This was just the other day. And you can see the breakdown of, it has the topic, who's accountable for that. So every process is accountable by one of the leadership members. And then they have responsible people on top of that. So somebody that was assigned this process, and then the accountable leadership person to make sure that process is approved at the end of the day. So that brought us to our RFI. Once the processes are done, for the most part, they're done. We're just doing some cleanup now. That's why we still have some half days going on. But now we went to the RFI that we put out in December, and that was due January 15th. And we ended up getting 7 responses back. And really the RFI is just a market scan of what's out there, what the cost would be, the timeline, maybe the annual fee, just to give us an idea of, hey, we have this much money set aside, and what's that going to look like. So the market scan showed us $2.2 million to $6 million is the cost. Implementation time somewhere between 10 months to 48 months, with an annual cost of around $260,000 to $440,000. So that just kind of gave us a ballpark of where we're at and where we need to go. And this is the slide that we put together with all the vendors and the information that they shared with us. So now this is where we're at today. We're at the RFP. So one thing we didn't do that I think was brought up was a budget proviso. And there's several reasons why we didn't go forward. One, we just didn't know the amount of money that we need to finish this project. Do we have enough set aside, or do we need more? And we just don't know that yet until the RFP is done. And then we'll have a better idea of where we're at. But also, we have to use our funds first before we can use any funds we get from the legislature. And June of 25 was not going to give us enough time. And you'll see that timeline here in a little bit. And it just not enough time to get that done. One of the qualifications we need is a quality assurance reviewer. So we're in the process of doing that RFP now, so we can get a QA on board to help us through that process. So like I said, it'll give us the cost, the timeline, and what it's going to take to get us done. So this is the rest of the story, so to speak. Is April, May, we'll do a procurement process, and then June and July, we'll hopefully get a vendor and get a readiness assessment done with the OCIO. And then we'll move in July, August, contract negotiations once a vendor is selected, so that we can start to narrow down that scope and process, and then the implementation stage in September. Now, once that happens, it says go live at the end. Well, we don't know what that date is yet, just because we have so many steps between now and then before we get there. So the discovery is basically going through all those processes with the vendor, so they know what we're doing, what they need to do. And then it's negotiating with them, coming up with a design, development, and then obviously the testing of our processes to make sure it's going to work. And then we've got to train staff so they know how these new processes are going to work with the new technology that's in place. And so that's just going to take time. So that's our Polaris, as we call our Polaris project for IT modernization. The other project we have going that's IT related is our records management system. And basically that is our library that we have for all of our records. And it's something that we need, something that has to happen. And so we're looking at March of trying to get a vendor and starting getting the software completed, starting the data migration and integration with our individual units, so they know where the records are and where they need to go, so we can search them. And that helps from a public records side of the house too. When we get a public records request, it's a lot easier to search our information if it's all in one place. Then in May, we'll do some training with our staff for implementation. And then June, hopefully we'll go live if all works out. So that's all I have. Quick and easy. Easier said than done, right? Any questions?
All right, well, thank you
Thank you.
very much. Appreciate the update. I think now we're gonna take a 10-minute break and then come back and do tab 6. And next we are going to move into the rulemaking portion of the meeting. These items on the agenda are the current rulemaking matters. These matters may be at different stages in the rulemaking process. The rule hearing is scheduled. These are legislative in character and are conducted to allow interested persons the opportunity to present comments individually. We're seeking to have a more in-depth discussion amongst commissioners, and commissioners should not feel rushed to resolve any concerns expressed today. We can ask that a rule be held over for further discussion or explore other options that are available to us. So the first rule is the tab 6 discussion on firearms and as a raffle prize, with Commissioner Lawson is leading that discussion.
So thank you, Chair Levy. After our discussion of firearms as raffle prizes last month, during that discussion, I was looking at WAC 230.06.025, which is our regulation on restrictions on firearms as prizes. And based on our discussion last month and the comments that were submitted by the public prior to that discussion, it seems to me that we can make some very minor changes to our regulation that would tighten it up a little bit, bring it more in line with how these raffles are actually being conducted in Washington state, and actually bring it in line with other state statutes. So WAC 230.06.025 says only charitable or nonprofit organizations operating a raffle may award firearms, air guns, or other mechanical devices which are capable of discharging dangerous projectiles, including but not limited to BB or CO2 guns, rifles, shotguns, pistols, or revolvers, or crossbows as a prize. If the prize awarded is restricted from transfer by state or federal law, the licensee must award the winner a certificate redeemable by a licensed firearms dealer for the prize offered. So I see 3 ways that we can make some small changes to this regulation that will, like I said, sort of tighten it up, bring it more in line with how these raffles are actually being conducted in Washington state, and also bring it in line with the state statutes. The first is that the regulation as it's written does not limit the certificate that's redeemable by a licensed firearm dealer to a Washington state dealer. And I think that that point needs to be clarified in regulation. The second item is that it doesn't limit the firearms that are available as prizes to only those firearms that are authorized for sale in Washington state. So it would be only a firearm authorized for sale in Washington state and a certificate that's only authorized, certificate that is from a Washington state licensed dealer. And then the third item is that this regulation doesn't prohibit persons who are not permitted to own firearms in this state from winning a firearm in a raffle. My most immediate thought was to a domestic violence offender who has had their right to own firearms restricted by the state legislature under 9.41.040. And so I think that we need to include in there that someone who is prohibited from owning a firearm in Washington state may not win a firearm as a prize under our regulations. That being said, we do still need to ensure that that person, if they are the winner in some raffle of a firearm and they are not allowed to own a firearm, that they still have some prize that they are allowed to receive. So the flip side of that is, of course, we need to ensure that if a prohibited person does win a firearm in a raffle, that they are not allowed to have the firearm, but that they are allowed to have a gift certificate in the amount of what the firearm would cost or some other sort of compensation. Those are my only 3 points. So with that, I will turn it back to Chair Levy.
Great. Thank you. And I do think that the point made about if they are prohibited from winning a firearm, they should be able to go back and get something of similar or equal value. But I guess with the one of awarding prohibited persons, like adding that to the rule, it seems like if the prize awarded is restricted from transfer by state or federal law, if they're prohibited under state law, doesn't that cover everything? Why do we need to change that? Maybe I misheard.
Well, I think, so if the way that I believe this works, and this is based on the comments that I read from the public in our last meeting, is that if someone wins a firearm as a prize, in a raffle, for example, they are then given a certificate that they can redeem at a firearms dealer. And then it's, of course, on the firearms dealer to run the background check and determine, whether or not that person is allowed to own a gun in Washington state. So in theory, this is all happening, but I think our regulation should be very clear that if you are an individual who is prohibited under state law from owning a firearm, you will not be entitled to the firearm as a prize in a raffle, regardless. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Seem like sensible changes, right? Just closing some minor loopholes and keeping it consistent with state regulation and law.
Yeah.
Certainly in support of that.
Okay, we will now open the public hearing and take public comment on the rules. Okay. Seeing any public comments, so
Statement, I guess we're open discussion. Is that where we're at?
sure.
Just asking. So, I don't know if this is a solution looking for a problem or not. I really don't. So I'm a little bit, rusty is probably not the right word because I probably never have really understood or known the whole process of transfer of firearms. That's just not an area that I spend any time in. So, I mean, I don't know that I'm at this point, supportive of opening up another rules process to modify this today. I'm not going to fight it real hard, certainly, but I mean, it seems like perhaps staff could capture, lay out the process for us now, because if in fact at the firearms dealer everything is being accomplished that is being proposed, then I don't know that we would need to add that redundancy to our rule. Because if as state laws change regarding firearms or less restrictive, I don't know that our rules should exceed that. So not passionate about it one way or the other, but that's how I feel right now.
All right, so are there any other questions, further discussion from commissioners? All right, we will close the public hearing on the rule change and take any motions.
Move that we initiate rulemaking to amend WAC 230-06-025 restrictions on firearms as prizes as presented.
I will second that. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
Yay.
All right, motion passes 3-1. Thank you. All right, next we have petition to initiate rulemaking, authorized centralized surveillance with Bill McGregor, the special agent supervisor.
We're on Chair, Commissioners, ex officio members, same President. My name is Bill McGregor, Special Agent Supervisor with Regulation and Enforcement Unit. Before you today is a petition from Vicki Christofferson on behalf of Maverick Gaming, requesting to create a rule structure to allow centralized surveillance of house banked card rooms under common ownership. The petitioner stated this change can help house bank card rooms with common ownership, ensure compliance with regulations, maintain a safe and secure environment for guests and staff, and protect gaming operations and the public. The petitioner seeks to update, according to them, seeks to update the WAC to reflect the advancement in technology and opportunity for house bank card rooms under common ownership to implement centralized surveillance monitoring systems designed to ensure that gambling is conducted in an honest, competitive, and safe environment. As you may recall, last month, you were provided with an update on the discussions with Maverick Gaming and research done to date on the topic. Maverick Gaming also provided an update on their research done to date, and the slides of those are in your packets. Currently, rules require Class F and house bank card room licensees to maintain a surveillance room with closed circuit television system within their licensed premises. House bank card room licensees are required to have a licensed card room employee in the surveillance room during all hours of operation. Staff did not find any jurisdiction in the United States currently allowing for centralized surveillance for card room activities by rule or regulation. Nevada has allowed it through a variance granted by Nevada Gaming Control Board Chair, and also Colorado authorizes centralized surveillance through the Division of Gaming's internal control minimum procedures. In the rule summary, staff has outlined policy considerations or concerns, and I can go over those if you want, or you have them in your packet. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Under the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act, the Commission must act on a petition within 60 days of receiving it, and your options are initiate rulemaking, proceedings by filing the rule as proposed for further discussion, or to deny the petition in writing, stating the reasons for the denial and specifically addressing the concerns stated in the petition, or where appropriate, indicate alternative means by which the agency will address the concerns raised by the petitioner.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion from the commissioners or Bill? Okay. We will now take public comments. We'll open this to public hearing on this rule. If you are joining via Teams and wish to provide comment, please raise your hand. In person, please approach the podium. Please state your name and the organization you're with. I will ask commissioners to hold all questions and comments until we've received all public comments on this rule. Public comment is a time for commissioners to hear from the public on the rules. All comments should be addressed to the commissioners and not the commission's staff. Is there anyone who would like to make?
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Vicki Christopherson here today on behalf of Maverick Gaming. Thanks for taking a look at this petition. We have had lots of really good conversations with staff as we've looked at exploring this option. You had a very robust discussion last meeting, and we thought that it was appropriate at this time to ask you to initiate rulemaking without foregone conclusions on what that rulemaking would actually look like. We did not file draft rules with the commission. We filed an outline of the components we think should be included in a centralized surveillance rule set. And it seems that the conversations at this point have progressed to the point where it's appropriate to open rulemaking to allow staff to then bring in more stakeholders to have the robust conversation on the structure of the rule, how to do it, who it would apply to, the distance requirements, all of the things that would be appropriate next steps. We feel that we have enough information on what's happened throughout the country to then take that next step. I think it's really important to note that centralized surveillance, in addition to providing the organizations that would be able to do it with the more efficiency and better systems, it also will allow much more immediate, in fact, 24/7 immediate access by gambling officers to access information and help us in making sure we're keeping the public safe. As you are modernizing your IT and we're modernizing systems across the country and across our company, this is one of those things that we think is appropriate at this point. I think that, again, I just want to make sure we're stating, we are not asking you to approve centralized surveillance today. We're asking you to open rulemaking to allow us to then have a broader, more robust stakeholder conversation with staff to structure a rule that we could then bring back for your consideration to make sure that it is consistent with your obligation to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, staff, ex officios. My name is Victor Mena. I am the president of New Phoenix and Last Frontier Casino. So I do have multiple properties. I do see the benefit of being able to open this dialogue and get some things vetted. One of my properties is house banked, and so it has got 24-hour surveillance. My second property is Class F. I haven't heard the Class F brought into this discussion, but there are several poker rooms in the state that are owned by multiple operators with multiple locations. And I think it would be a benefit for us to be able to monitor what happens in a poker room through a basic manned audience in a room. So I think that there's a benefit there as well. I do think that as we move forward into new technologies and new abilities, as things are coming out, it would benefit the industries to be able to see what the options are to gain efficiencies of operations. So as a multiple card room operator, I think it's a great dialogue for you guys to engage in. And if you have any questions, feel free.
We'll hold questions until after all the public comments are over. Thank you very much.
Hello, Commission. I'm Eric Person, owner of Maverick Gaming. First of all, I just want to take a minute to thank the staff for working with us the last few months on this technology and this opportunity. I think it really is one of these rare cases where I think we can provide much better service to the state. We can give real-time access to state agents when there's issues versus having to physically drive to each location, which obviously takes time and resources. It also is one of these things where when you're looking at, when the commission was presenting the last 6 months, how the revenues are declining, you know, at the end of the day, those are card room revenues, and this is a stressed industry. So any opportunity to consolidate, find efficiencies, bring in new technologies so that we can be, as you guys know, I was supportive of raising fees in the last case. This is a chance where I think we can provide a better service at a more economical cost and better. And really, I think in the end, we'll just have a better product and everyone will win. So I'm super excited to work with the state to bring this. You know, both of my jurisdictions that I'm in, Nevada, Colorado, have allowed me to do this, and obviously allowed other operators in many jurisdictions, including like California or Nevada, don't even require band surveillance when the revenues are under $15 million. So I think this is one of those things where when this regulation was built, we were using VHS tapes, and now we're not. So looking forward to bringing this into 2024. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comments? Any hands raised here? Okay, do any of the commissioners have any questions for those that commented? Or any other discussions? I might have one question. If we were to move forward with some sort of rulemaking, and let's say at the end of it, we decided that we would try this for like a 2-year period, but then after 2 years, we could end it altogether if we didn't like it. Would that be, I'm assuming it's going to cost money to implement this and do all of this. So would that be something that anybody would be open to, or is that too expensive and too not something you're interested in?
Well, for better or worse, I've only worked in privilege licenses my entire career, and so I have always been at the whim of the various regulatory commissions, and things change. And so if that were to be the case, I'm sure there'd be robust discussion coming to some conclusion rationally, and there must be some good reason. And if that was the case, then I suppose I'd support it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we will go ahead and close the public hearing and take any motions. Anybody have a motion?
I move to initiate rulemaking proceedings for further discussion.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? I didn't hear you, Commissioner Epson. Did
Aye,
you
I
say
said
aye? Okay, well, I want to make sure it's clear. Okay, so thank you for that.
Chair, if I may, given, as we move forward for rulemaking, is there any sort of guidance that you all want to have impart upon us in terms of mechanism that you would like to see moving forward, or just staff put forward based on the best regulatory approach we feel moving forward, or any input?
For me, I would say, I feel like the staff has been looking at this for quite some time as of now. And so I think I trust them to understand what might work the best for our state, and based on all the research and meetings and whatnot that have been had so far. So I would just let the staff kind of put something together and then go from there. Okay. Anyone has other thoughts, feel free.
So one thing that I haven't quite been able to wrap my head around, I'm sure there's some sort of logical rationale, but maybe some more information, is the common ownership component. And I understand people want to, have everything within, a single structure. But if in fact centralized surveillance is consistent with the needs of our regulatory purpose, then, not that it's mandatory, that it would be, different owners compiling and working and essentially probably having some savings by having a centralized surveillance. So, I mean, for me, I want to make sure that we look at it completely, and whether, what the common ownership component of that would be. So I mean, if centralized surveillance meets all of our regulatory needs, then is common ownership a deciding factor or not?
Thank you. All right, so we will now move to tab 8, which is the staff rule amendment for discussion and possible filing regarding adjacent card rooms with Adam Amarine.
Yes.
Okay, our staff attorney and rules coordinator. Thank you, Adam.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Adam Amaran. I'm the staff attorney with the Gambling Commission. I've been in that position for about a year. And with Lisa McLean's recent departure from the agency, I will be stepping into the rules coordinator position on an interim basis. With that, I'd like to turn your attention to tab 8, which is the discussion of the adjacent card rooms. This rule was a staff proposed rule aimed at providing clarifying language to ensure that adjacent card rooms operate as separate and distinct businesses. This rule would repeal WAC 230.06.046 and replace it with the new WAC 230.03.182. At the last meeting, commissioners authorized staff to initiate rulemaking on an expedited basis for the repeal of the current rule. And to make the new rule, repeal of the current rule once the new rule becomes effective. Additionally, we filed a WAC 230.03.182 for further discussions with additional language to subsection 3 to further identify adjacent card rooms licensed as of July 1st, 2018 are not bound by the requirements. Since the last meeting, staff has received additional comments which are included in your packet. Now, final action cannot be taken on this measure until the March meeting. However, at this time, your options include but are not limited to further discussion on the proposed change, taking action to amend the language filed at the January meeting, which may result in a new CR 102 filing, directing staff to do further research, or continuing discussion and possible action on the rule at the March meeting. With that, thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from any commissioners? Doesn't look like it. And just to make sure the commissioners all know that there was public comment submitted via email that you were provided earlier. Okay, so now, were there any discussion from the commissioners? Okay. Oh, here. Right in front of you. All right, so we will now open. We'll now open this up to public comments. Any public comment?
I'm Eric Person, owner of Maverick Gaming. Last month, I testified for the commission, and I tried to, I think, say it more lightly. My perspective is that this rule as drafted, this WAC proposal, is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. It amounts to property taking, which is very established law in the state of Washington. And I can illustrate. For example, I have a house on Bainbridge Island that's 35 feet off the water. Property rights run with the land. And today that house could not be built. But I can sell that house and they won't tear it down or make them move back. Cannabis, for example, as businesses. And what happens is sometimes maybe a daycare comes in close. They don't make the cannabis business in Washington go away. And if they sell it, it doesn't have to be extinguished because it can't be so close to a daycare. As proposed, this language would require, it would be a taking of my property and require that asset to be modified to the new current rule proposal. And I believe that is unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners or any further discussion? All right, we will now close the public hearing on the rule change and take a motion.
This is listed as discussion only, but you're welcome to take, you're welcome to make a motion. But you have many options here. Yes, you, I mean, well, there's a lot of things that they can do. I think there's a number of things outlined as possible, but you cannot take final action this
Right.
month. That's the most important thing.
I guess we don't need a motion. We don't have to have one. So, all right. Thank you, Adam. And then we will take another quick 5-minute break. And we'll resume. All right, welcome back. We are now on tab 9, which is the director's salary review. However, we are going to move that discussion to another agenda for a later date. So this brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. Today's meeting and the March meeting are considered special meetings because we moved the location and the timing of the announcing the movement of location could not be provided in time with the code revisor's office, those timelines that were necessary. So that's why those are special meetings. And I understand that there may be some confusion about when we adjourned this meeting or what the start time was. So for that reason, I am going to ask the commissioners that we do another vote on both the consent agenda and on tab 2, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So if we can go ahead and get the tab 1, the consent agenda, if we can start that, just the motion, get that on the record.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented by staff, which includes holding the April 2024 meeting at the Gambling Commission office in Lacey.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. For tab 2 was the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation that we heard. So we have a motion for that.
I move to approve Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation's request to exceed $300,000 limit and grant a $550,000 limit in raffle prizes paid during the license year ending December 31st, 2024.
Okay.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes as well. Thank you. We will now be going into executive session.
Can we do another budget update?
No. That was just an update. Which we will be about an hour. So we will probably be done about noon, is what I'll say. And then we will come back to the meeting to adjourn. It's now 12 o'clock and the next Gambling Commission meeting will be held here at the Liquor and Cannabis Board on March 14th and 15th. We are now adjourned.